And let me go over what you all are doing for next week. So this is what the Canvas site looks like. If you notice at the top, I put our Zoom address for all our class meetings. So in the future, just please come there. This is our business from last week. Syllabus, recording the first class meeting, introduction notes. And then for this, today, you read the Apology and the Credo, which are here. And then your reading responses are here. And it looks like the vast majority of you already did them, which is super. Just about everybody. And then for next week, you see here, you have your reading responses to the Gorgias. Now, I've not included the text for the Gorgias because this one you have to get yourself. I have recommended a text, an edition on your syllabus that I think is a very good translation. You may find online versions, but I cannot guarantee the translation. For those of you in the know, available translations of books online, they're very often those that have their copyright is lapsed, which means they are ancient. So there are 100-year-old translations of the Gorgias in Victorian prose, but I wouldn't recommend it. But if you're really screwed or in a pinch, you can use it. But I have to show you all one very important feature of all Plato's texts that we are going to be using quite a bit. So I'm going to take a look at your Apology here. This is your text for the Apology. Let me get this out of the way. And if you notice here where my arrow is, see these numbers, 17B, C, D, 18B, C, D, E. Okay, here's the deal, everybody. These are the standard citations for all of Plato's works, okay? So when I quote from Plato, I'm not actually going to be mentioning the page numbers. This is the Credo. You'll see it has the line numbers again. What I'm going to do is I'm not going to be citing the page numbers. I'm going to be citing the line numbers. And so when you cite Plato, I'm going to ask you to do the same, okay? So if you're going to find a translation of Plato's Gorgias, it needs to have line numbers too, okay? But again, you know, the easiest way to deal with this is to get the edition I've recommended, which is an excellent translation, also has an excellent introduction, which can be very useful to you. And then it also has all those line numbers, okay? Okay, and this is where your reading responses for Gorgias part 1 will be. The Gorgias we're going to read in 2 sections. It's a little bit of a bigger dialogue, and I've broken it in half, okay? So for next week, you read the first part. On your syllabus, by the way, I've indicated what your reading is, so let me head over there. Actually, I'm going to do it over here. Here's your syllabus. So here we are. Today is the 8th. We're going to talk about the Apology and the Credo. For next week, module 3, you're going to read the Gorgias up to line 481, okay? 481b. That is about halfway through. So you notice 481b, there you go. That's the line number, okay? So basically what happened is that at a certain point, scholars sat down to translate all of Plato's works, and they did it from the very first to the very end. And they have done these from lines 1 through 1,000, okay? So the Apology, the line numbers indicate to you that it's a very early work of Plato. That's what the scholars think, and everybody seems to agree, and I'll talk about that. And then the Gorgias seems to be at least a middle age work, I guess you should say, of Plato, okay? So does anybody have any questions about any of this stuff? Or about your assignment for next week? All right. Good. Okay, well, if you have any questions at any point, let me know. So for today, you read the Apology and you read the Credo. And the Apology is one of Plato's greatest works. It's not long. It's a little cryptic. We'll talk about some things. It's a little different from his other works in that it is not a dialogue. I indicated to you on the first day that Plato likes to teach in dialogue. And there's a very important reason for that. We'll talk about that. Maybe not today, or maybe. But the fact that Plato teaches in terms of dialogue or writes in terms of dialogue, he thinks of that says something essential about what he thinks philosophy is, okay? So the Apology, though, this is not a dialogue. This is a monologue. This is This is Socrates' defense. Okay, apology in Greek, apologos, means a defense. It is his defense statement before a jury where he is on trial, of course. So I think we're going to work our way through some of these things. We're going to work our way through some of this text, okay, and discuss it as we go along. It's very meaty. There is a lot here. As I indicated to you, everyone seems to be in agreement. All scholars, historians seem to be in agreement. This is the earliest of Plato's works. Plato was, of course, greatly inspired by Socrates. Socrates was a factual person. We know that he existed in Athens. A lot of people wrote about him. He, however, never wrote a word, okay? All that we know about Socrates' thinking is from Plato and this lesser-known philosopher named Xenophon, who I indicated last week, but nobody reads Xenophon, poor guy. So Plato is our greatest expert when it comes to what Socrates thought. The only problem, as I indicated to you last week, is that Plato lived a very long life, especially in his time period when life expectancy was probably like 30 or 40 years old. He lives to be 80. Very impressive. And you have to think that over a course of writing for 50 years, the Socrates that makes its appearance through his work in every single piece he writes, Socrates is his mouthpiece, if you will, that Socrates changes. So I want you to pay close attention as we move through the work of Plato about what changes, okay? This apology here is taken to be very authentic, very early Socrates. Scholars have a good sense that this is what he really thought, and this is what he really said. But Plato will take liberties later on, okay? Okay, so he's on trial, and I think the best way to work our way through this is to talk about the various accusations against him. So what do we learn about, I'm going to throw this over to you guys now. What do we learn about the accusations in general against Socrates? What is revealed early on about these accusations? Who wants to tell us something?
In his opinion, they were like implanted in the people that were accusing him from like an early age, from like rumors and stuff.
Gotcha. Audrey points out he is not popular. That is accurate. What else do you want to tell me about these accusations? Lydia points out that they're old.
They all contradict themselves to a certain degree.
Okay. Thank you, Robert. We'll pull them apart, we'll analyze them. Yes.
They all have to do with intellectual things, like they aren't like accusations of him committing any actual crimes.
Right. Excellent. That's a great point. Izzy, thank you. They're not real crimes. He didn't kill anybody, right? Anything else you want to tell me about the accusations?
The later set is it's the only set that's truly written down. It's he's on trial for kind of two different things, but the official set of accusations was later, and it was written by like 3 different people.
Good. Okay. We have some important things here. We have 2 different sets of accusations. Good. We have an older set, as Lydia indicates, that stretches entire life, and a newer set, Lauren points out, which seem to be the charges that have dragged him into court. Okay? So let's deal with these in turn. Well, which does Socrates deal with first? Does he deal with the older accusations or the newer ones?
The older ones.
He does. He deals with the older ones. So we need to jump on that. What are the older, long-standing accusations against Socrates?
They're the more reputation-based ones. They're about him corrupting children. What was the other one?
No, that's the new one.
Those are the newer ones, Robert. You jumped the gun. It's all right. Hang on to that for the next round. Let's deal with the older ones first. They're not totally unrelated, though. I mean, they definitely echo each other. This is where it's helpful for y'all to look at the text. Tell me what the older accusations are, and somebody point them out for your classmates.
So, kind of devil's advocating.
I'm sorry, Izzy, can you say that again, please?
One of them was making the worse argument better.
Good.
So, like devil's advocating, I'm
Yes.
guessing.
Yes. Anybody know what the other one was?
Well,
The other one was that he doesn't believe in gods.
Careful.
Wasn't it busying himself with more philosophical pursuits?
That's a little general. By the way, you guys, you can also use the hand raising function here under participants, right? And I'll do my best to get you in order. Philosophical, that's a little bit general. Kelly points out this business about the gods. That's actually the later accusations. There's one other earlier accusation. Izzy tells us he is guilty of making the weaker argument seem stronger. And what else? Audra points out something here. Let's see. Audra, he was concerning himself with matters above and below the earth. That's it. Anybody know, let's see if we're going to practice our Plato citations. Somebody find where this is in the text. Line number, please.
I think it's 19b,
19b.
or like somewhere around there. If I'm
Let's come up there. That
citing
is
that correctly.
19b. So the way this works is, I'm going to hold up my text. Does that help? See, 19, and then you go down to bang, there it is. By the way, at 19, that's A, just so you know, even though it's not always listed. So it's written here in 19b. It goes something like this. Socrates is guilty of wrongdoing in that he busies himself studying things in the sky and below the earth. He makes the worse into the stronger argument, and he teaches these same things to others. Okay. He goes on to say, you've seen this yourselves in the comedy of Aristophanes. I will talk about that a little bit. Aristophanes was the great comic playwright of Athens, and he wrote a very famous play spoofing Socrates called Clouds. And this is exactly the characterization, the depiction of Aristophanes that Socrates is mentioning here. By the way, Aristophanes was very bawdy, very raunchy and racy, and his depiction of Socrates is really raunchy and racy too, but I'll get into that later. Okay, so we have two accusations. On the one hand, we have the claim that he is busying himself with things below the earth and above, up in the sky. What was it good? Things in the sky and below the earth. He's busying himself with things in the sky and below the earth. That is a strange way of putting it. At 18b, it's also articulated a little differently. He says he is a student of all things in the sky and below the earth. In other words, he's studying the sky and the earth. Why is this a problem? Why is this potentially a problem? Why is this controversial for the ancient Greeks?
I think it might have been considered controversial because it went against their beliefs in the gods being the ones that were in charge of the elements, in charge of the sky, in charge of everything. So to question that and look at it and analyze it went against their basic belief systems.
Excellent.
I think like furthering that point too, it was definitely like unsettling for him, like for all of the people who have believed in that so strongly. Like I think he referenced like Miletus pretended to care about a lot of these issues, but in reality he was just using them as an excuse to find a way to prosecute him.
Good. All right, I'm going to share the whiteboard here because we need to talk a little bit about something. We have to talk about, I forget who was speaking up there a minute ago, maybe that was Mike, about how the ancient Greeks viewed the earth and the sky. Specifically, what did the sun represent to the ancient Greeks? Or how about the moon?
Didn't they say the sun was a rock or something like that?
Well,
Well, the sun wasn't the sun carried by a god across the sky in a chariot, and it was one of Zeus's children. So it was just one of.
mm-hmm. So Henry, what you're referencing is something I'm going to talk about in just a second, which is the controversy that they're accusing Socrates of being part of. But as Audra has already indicated here on my whiteboard, I didn't know you guys could do that. The natural forms for the Greeks, they were represented by gods. The sun was Apollo. The moon, I do not believe the moon is Artemis, actually. I believe the moon is Diana. But
They split between different gods become the sun and moon at different times.
yeah, I'm not going to be a stickler for detail here because it's the general idea that I want us to talk about. But what we're really talking about here is we're talking about the Greek pantheon. Pantheon, pan means all, theos means God. Theon is plural for gods. So when we talk about the Greek pantheon, we're talking about all the gods. The ancient Greeks were polytheistic. And their form of religion was very typical of the ancient Mediterranean and much of the ancient world at this point in time. I'm getting an indication that my internet connection is unstable. Are you able to hear me, guys?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I have all these teenagers doing their schooling online here too. It's a real pain. Any case, the Greek pantheon, the Greeks assigned, they had a selection, the collection of gods. By the way, they also called these the Olympic gods because they believed that, or the claim was that the seat of the gods was a place called Olympus, which is a real city, or at least it's the remains of a city in ancient Greece, which was where they also had the Olympic Games. Mount Olympus, I should say. Mount Olympus. They lived on top of Mount Olympus in ancient Greece. And there were many of them, and they each represented a different form of the earth. Well, so you had Apollo as the sun. I thought Diana was the moon. I thought Artemis, in any case, I've been teaching for 20 years and I still can't get it right. Anybody know what god represented the ocean or the sea?
Neptune?
Neptune.
Poseidon.
Poseidon.
Poseidon. Okay, listen up, everybody. For those not in the know, or if you haven't, just refresh your memory from 6th grade mythology, you have the Romans. By the way, you have to understand this. The Romans, not very creative. They didn't come up with anything unique of their own in religion and philosophy. They relied on the Greeks for this in general. And so they had Roman names, Latin names for all the Greek gods. So who was the king of the gods for the the Greeks? Sorry.
Zeus.
Zeus. And how did you know he was out and about and angry?
Storms.
Storms and thunder, right? Anybody know what his Latin counterpart is?
Jupiter.
Jupiter, right. Then you have Poseidon, who is the god of the sea, and that was Neptune. And Apollo is the god of the sun. We're going to be dealing with him today. And that is Helios, as I believe Audrey tells us for the Romans, and so on and so forth. Okay, so all of the gods had equivalents in Latin. But the point is this. we need to talk about polytheism more generally, because this is going to be very important, especially as we move into the Republic. And I'm going to apologize in advance that I'm not able to keep up with the chat. So if anybody sees anything exciting there that I've missed, please do call my attention to it. I appreciate it.
What was the Latin name of Apollo?
Helios.
That wasn't it. Helios was a Greek titan.
Apollo is Apollo no matter whether he's Greek or Roman. He doesn't really change.
Well, okay. I thought he was Helios.
Helios was a titan.
Helios is the actual sun. Yeah.
Apollo is just the god that pulls the sun.
Helios is like a similar as Gaia, the goddess of the earth.
All right, you guys you're much better on this than I am. I'm a big picture guy, everybody. Big picture. So the big picture is that the ancient Greeks, they assigned gods to the various forms of nature. And so what this enabled them, this gave them a kind of form of explanation, of course, right? So that when there was a thunderstorm, what was going on?
Poseidon was angry. Oh, not Poseidon. Zeus was angry.
And if there is, and if there is a sea storm, then Poseidon is angry. And if you are a farmer and you want to make sure your crops don't get flattened by a storm, what are you going to do?
Pray to Demeter or Persephone.
You'll make a sacrifice. It was, and for Poseidon, similarly, if you were to make a trip on sea, you would make a sacrifice to Poseidon to appease the god Poseidon. The famous story of this in the Iliad is that Agamemnon, I forget what city he was from, he wanted to sail off to Troy, and it was foretold him that he was going to have a storm. So does anybody know what he sacrifices to make that trip?
His own son?
His daughter, Iphigenia. And then when he comes back, his wife kills him because she's been so angry all these years. So what I want to indicate to you all here, and this will be useful going forward, is that, you know, from a philosophical standpoint, polytheism offers an important method of explanation, right? Explaining natural phenomena that the science at the time had no idea of, right? Earthquakes, no idea. They seemed random and happen chance. By the way, does anybody know which god was responsible for earthquakes?
Poseidon.
Well, we get Hephaestus here. I forget his deal. I think he was the blacksmith of the gods. So
Would it be Hades?
he was the god of the underworld. Take your pick.
Yeah.
They're both nasty. We're going to be dealing with the character of these gods shortly. Many of you may be familiar with their personality. By the way, I'm guessing that our international students may not be as familiar with the Greek mythology. In American education, all my kids, for example, had to read the Greek myths in 6th grade. So I'm assuming Americans in the house have read that. And this will not be a deal breaker at all going forward. We're going to help you along. Sunny says, yes, how do you know it? Okay, well, I guess are there some movies too? Who's Percy Jackson? I don't even know who that is.
Hercules.
I feel old. Well, yes, my daughter was watching that Hercules Disney movie the other day. I didn't really pay attention, but I think there's some mythology in there. Okay, back to Socrates. So Socrates is saying that, look, you guys are upset with me that I am studying the sky and the earth as if these were natural objects and not properly revering them and respecting them as divine beings, okay? Second accusation is that he is making the weaker argument the stronger. What is that about? Anybody?
wasn't it? The way I interpreted it was about when he was claiming that other people's assumed intelligence was weaker than his acknowledged ignorance. That's what I wrote in my paper response.
Well, what does that mean, though?
So he didn't think he knew things. He didn't think he was knowledgeable about random subjects, whereas Craftsman and like the other people he interviewed, shall we say, thought they were knowledgeable about subjects that they weren't.
Okay. Oh, I see what you're talking about there. Well, I just want to understand what the accusation itself means. What is that? The first accusation is pretty clear. It's that he's studying natural objects as if they were not divine beings, you know, basically a kind of profane study. But to say that he makes the weaker argument the stronger, what does that accusation just say? What does that mean?
That he likes to argue?
Okay.
I interpret it as him championing ignorance.
Good. Okay.
I saw it just as like him doing philosophy in general.
Yeah.
I saw it just as him like questioning what was like right and like what's the given.
Good. Okay. Yes, Kieran.
I thought it was like him not sticking to what the vast majority thinks that is just right, and sort of appreciating and actually like revealing like the thoughts or the ideas that were not what the majority believed in, and he sort of challenged the minds of the majority, which seems to be ignorant a little bit.
Good. Yeah.
He made the wrong thing right. Seemed right.
There you go. That's it, really. He, you know, to say that he makes the weaker the stronger suggests that he is kind of putting truth on its head. He's making the weaker argument. He's making what is not true seem true. Okay, or as Kieran was putting it, the minority opinion override the majority opinion, which is aligned with truth. Okay, let me break down what he's doing here, okay, everybody? Because there's just something I need to tell you about what he's up to here. Oh, shoot, that's not what I wanted. Sorry, let me get my whiteboard here. Okay. It turns out that he is identifying two specific types of people here, two specific groups that are his contemporaries in Athens at the time. On one hand, you have what are a group referred to as, what's going on here, as the natural scientists. And in fact, he identifies one of them by the name of Anaxagoras. There were several men like Anaxagoras at this time who were trying to understand, they're making claims about what is the essential nature of being, the essential nature of matter. Anaxagoras, is it water? Is it air? Is it fire? They were arguments about the essential element of it all. And there were many who complained that what they were doing in this process was desacralizing nature. By desacralizing nature, I mean they're making it less sacred in subjecting it to this kind of study. Now, it turns out that Socrates, throughout his life, is actually a critic of these natural scientists. And he's a critic of study of science, studying objects for their own sake. According to Socrates, the upshot or the consequence of any study that humans do should be moral information. Any kind of study, scientific or otherwise, in other words, must indicate about the best way to live. It must not just study objects themselves to understand them, okay? So I'll give you an example. My best friend, his sister, is a professor of biology down here at University of Maryland, and her specialty is slugs. Slugs, okay? Slugs, we all know slugs. I really am not a fan of slugs. I do feed them to my chickens, though. They enjoy them. But slugs, Socrates' question would be, what the fuck? right? Why are you studying slugs? What do you need? What do you gain for the human good in understanding slugs? You must not just study slugs to understand slug behavior, right? And by the way, he distinguishes moral knowledge from utilitarian knowledge. It can be useful to know certain things about slug behavior. Maybe slugs, for example, could help us develop a coronavirus vaccine. That would be super. But that is utilitarian knowledge, and that is not necessarily moral knowledge. So what's the point? Socrates is being accused of something that he has always criticized. There's deep irony here. Now, I'm going to pause for a second. There is indirect evidence throughout the Apology that he is not a natural scientist. What does he spend his time studying? Where does he study? What does he study?
He does a lot of questioning people. Like he kind of studies people's wisdom through questioning them and sort of almost studying logic.
Thank you. He never spends his time with a microscope in the weeds, looking at the rocks, looking at the trees. His laboratory is the city of Athens, and he interviews people. Refutation. Okay? Done. Next. I'm going to do both of these, and then I'll open up to questions if you're not following. To the second set of accusations, making the stronger argument, the weaker argument, the stronger. Here he is referencing a specific group of people in Athens that he's also spent his entire life critiquing and combating. And in fact, we're going to be dealing with these people very much, because the next dialogue you read, the Gorgias, he is one of these. These are called the Sophists. The Sophists are orators. They are experts and teachers in the art of oratory. What is oratory?
Speaking with other people.
Speak close.
Storytelling.
I wouldn't say speaking with other people.
Public speaking, speaking to people.
Speaking to other people in a persuasive fashion. Another word for this? Rhetoric. So Gorgias is one of them. We're going to be seeing him next week. Another famous one at the time was a guy by the name of Protagoras. And he was very well known in Athens. Now, it turns out that these guys were kind of like rock stars. They were kind of quasi-entertainers, political gurus, and I think that captures it. Here's the deal. If you wanted to make a life in politics, this is who you studied with. You learned how to be persuasive. You learned how to speak persuasively as opposed to what?
Confrontationally?
Close.
Frankly?
There you go. Truth was not their concern. Persuasion was their concern. If the persuasive argument tends to be the true one, fine, but it didn't really matter. I mentioned a second ago that the Sophists were entertainers. They would actually, the main market in Athens is a place called the Agora. Still there, Agora. It was the center of the city. It's not only where things were sold, but where political speeches were given and entertainment was had. And the Sophists would get on a pedestal and give a speech. And they would say things like, give me an argument. And they would and someone would suggest something, and they'd rattle it off, and then they'd say, and now I'm going to argue the counter argument. And then they'd rattle that off completely. They could rattle off arguments pro and against, which suggested, and this is where Socrates took exception, this suggested that they did not care a whit about the truth. Okay? Now, let's deal with the refutation of the sophists, and then I'll open up to questions. The sophists were wealthy. They were hired teachers. They were hired by the politicians, and they cared little about the truth. What do we know about Socrates' position? Is he a teacher?
So he was never paid for speaking. He lived a poor life.
He never, right, he was not a teacher. He disavows being a teacher, and he lived a poor life. And Cameron points out he smells.
Different.
You know that, Cameron?
Different thing.
Huh?
Different thing. Socrates didn't smell. I mean, he might have. I can't say for certain, but that was in regards to it.
No, Cameron, he definitely smelled.
Definitely probably did. He was a stinky old man.
Nietzsche, 19th century philosopher Nietzsche, goes on and says, Socrates would have stunk. He would have smelled. He had probably eaten anchovies, and garlic. He lived in the Mediterranean. And then imagine he's going to corner you and pester you with questions up in your face. Did he shower? I doubt it. Dental care? Non-existent. He's poor. He doesn't take money for teaching. He doesn't teach. He is not a sophist. The sophists, they were political gurus. They lorded it over the politicians that they taught. They were fancy. In biblical terms, these are the Pharisees, okay, everybody? If that analogy helps. Socrates is not one of them. There's your refutation. He is poor. He has no money. He never commands money. Does he have a job? He has no fucking job. Does he have a wife? Does he have children? He has a wife and children. How do you think his wife feels about him when he comes home after a long day interrogating people and bringing no goddamn money home?
Was she affluent? Like, was she the breadwinner?
Good question. No, she was not. He was sustained by wealthy friends like Plato. Plato was wealthy. Socrates was not. But I like to think that his wife, who is never quoted anywhere, hated his guts. She probably was full of resentment and anger when he trotted home. Apparently, Socrates was also reputed to be a famous drinker. So she was probably not too excited at the sight of him. But that doesn't come up. I mean, at least not officially. Okay. So the first set of accusations are actually dealt with indirectly. Okay. And the culmination of them is a story he tells. So why don't we dive into that story, and then I'll open it up. That's probably a good place, okay? Socrates at this point says, listen, y'all. I have had a bad reputation in this city my whole life. And I think I know why. What is his explanation for his bad reputation?
He says that he was informed by an oracle that was speaking for a god that was saying that he was the smartest person or something like that.
Good.
So to test everyone else on behalf of the god.
Good. I want more details, please. Thank you.
Sorry. I was going to say, building on that, he went so far as to say that if his practice of philosophy and theory were taken away, it would be a violation of God's intention. Well, this was during his argument of like why he's not an atheist, but he was also trying to justify like how deplatforming him would bring turmoil, I guess. Like, since, yeah, I don't know.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Anybody else?
He sort of arrives at the conclusion that because he doesn't think of himself as particularly wise, that the god was kind of using him as an example more, like the people who think of themselves as not wise, such as this Socrates does are actually like significant, things like that.
Good, good, good. All right. A couple things here. First of all, what's an oracle?
They foresee the future, like give prophecy.
Good. Where was this oracle given?
Delphi.
Delphi. Anybody know what temple's at Delphi? That's the temple of the god Apollo. So shrines to the gods had their headquarters in certain places. The shrine to Poseidon sits on a peninsula near Athens called Sunion. I've been there, it's gorgeous. In Athens itself, you have the temple to Athena, the Parthenon. The temple of the goddess of Diana was in Ephesus, off the coast of modern-day Turkey. And the point is, when you visited these places, you would make a sacrifice to these various gods. Delphi sits up in the mountains, I think about 2 hours from Athens. A very dramatic, beautiful place. And that's where there was a religious city, a religious settlement, and there was a temple for the god Apollo. And there was a priestess that would sit inside the temple. And the temple sat on like a volcanic mountain. And this mountain emitted volcanic gases. And the priestess would inhale these gases and then turn around and, you know, make oracles about the future. So she's high, okay? She's basically high. And her oracle at this one point is that, as someone indicated, I think Robert, I think the story is, right, Socrates sends his friend, hey, the name's friend is Chaerephon. And Socrates says to Chaerephon, why don't you go over to the god, to the oracle, the priestess who gets high, and ask her who's the wisest of all. And he goes, and the oracle says, it's Socrates. And Chaerephon comes back to Socrates and says, Socrates, you're never going to believe it. The priestess says, you're the wisest. Okay? How does Socrates respond to that? Yes, Cameron.
He kind of took it as a purpose for his life to go around and try and seek out someone who is wiser than him.
Did he believe it at first? No, he didn't believe it, right? Can't be. Socrates says, can't be. There are all these other wise people around here. I'm going to go interview them. Who does he go to? Who does he go to first?
The orators.
I'm sorry?
I believe it was the orators.
The orators?
Like the other public speakers.
Let's see if we can find this. Can anybody find the passage where he talks about the people he went to? Anybody find that passage? Where does he talk about the various types of people he interviews?
That's 22a.
22a? Yeah.
21.
And above that as well. Well, in my translation, he says he started with our public men. Public men, that's a translation of political. So he starts with the politicians, right? Then he goes to who?
Poets.
Poets. Then the writers of tragedies. This is now 22b. Why that order? Why does he start with politicians first?
Like because they have the highest reputation.
Uh-huh.
At least
I have a little more specifics.
They're supposed to be the wisest because they're entrusted to lead everybody.
Okay. They're supposed to be the wisest because they're entrusted to lead everybody. Okay. Why else does he think they're the wisest? What do the politicians say about themselves? Come on, everybody. Is
They
anybody
believe
watching this
they're
presidential
wisest.
campaign? I'm sorry?
They believe they are the wisest.
They believe they're the wisest. Look at Donald Trump, right? I'm the smartest. I'm the wisest. I know the best. So Socrates says, oh my God, I better go interview you first. So he goes to interview these politicians, right? And how do these interviews go, everybody?
Instead of reinforcing their preconceived ego, he challenges them, I guess.
Good. Anybody else want to follow her lead?
He finds evidence that everyone else has a sort of assumed intelligence where they think they're smarter than they actually are.
Excellent. And then what does he do?
Then proclaims his own philosophical conclusions that are contradictory often to public opinion.
Okay, but Vivian, you're being very general.
Oh, sorry.
He makes a scene where he calls them dumb.
Oh, he calls them dumb, right? So listen up, people. He interviews them and he could like quietly ask them questions, then conclude, oh my God, these people are stupid. He doesn't do that. He listens to them and he says, oh my God, guys, you are not wise and now I'm going to show you why. And by the way, where did he do this?
He did this in public with everyone
Did this?
able to see.
He did this in public for everybody to see it. How do you think that went down? And then his conclusion. Who's the wisest?
He would still be the wisest then? Something like that?
His conclusion is he's the wisest. Why? How does he know he's the wisest? What does he know that nobody else knows?
That he knows nothing.
He knows. Well, I wouldn't say nothing, but he knows that he doesn't know everything. Whereas everybody else who claims they're wise, they think they know. Well, actually, let's break this down. This is line 21CD. Socrates details this in great detail here, and he describes in great detail. 21CD, he says, I went to one of those reputed wise, thinking that there, if anywhere, I could refute the oracle and say to it, this man is wiser than I am. But you said I was. Then when I examined this man, there's no need for me to tell you his name. He was one of our politicians. My experience was something like this. I thought that he appeared wise to many people, and especially to himself, but he was not. I then tried to show him that he thought himself wise, but he was not. As a result, he came to dislike me, and so did many of the bystanders. So I withdrew and thought to myself, I'm wiser than this man. It's likely that neither of us knows anything worthwhile, but he thinks he knows something when he does not, whereas when I do not know, neither do I think I know. So I'm likely to be wiser. There you have it. All right. I'm going to pause for a second and see. Questions, comments, observations, complaints.
I found that this might be a unnecessary parallel, but the like the who is the wisest to be similar to the like Judgment of Paris beauty contest thing, like who's the most beautiful from the Aeneid. I'm just making a lot of parallels to the Aeneid because I had to read it in high school.
I never thought of that before.
It just seems like petty jealousy. So
okay. Anybody else? Any other questions or comments? I have a question for you all.
Sorry.
Here we go. Sunny,
sorry, Furman.
you have the floor.
Yeah, I just think it was very clever of him to include that anecdote. If they were to refute his story about the oracle and him being the wisest, they would, in turn, refute or at least partially refute their argument that he does not believe in spiritual things.
Okay. Good.
But also, if they were to refute it, wouldn't they technically be refuting like the word similar to a god? So they would be disagreeing with their deity.
Good.
They didn't believe that he was sent by the god, though. Like, they thought he was just crazy.
Good. Okay. Well, Sunny, you're pointing to an important rebuttal that's coming to the second set of accusations, actually. But you'd point out that, he's already accused of this in the first set, right? That he's desacralizing nature. But here he goes. He is at least, look, guys, he's only obeying the god, right? He's only obeying the god. So when the Athenians, what are they mad at him for? They're mad at him for these interrogations into their supposed wisdom and then proving them that they're not wise. And Socrates' explanation is, hey, guys, I was just doing what God told me to do. Okay? Get off my back. How's that sound? All right, here's a question. Is Socrates humble?
I think he would believe he is, but I do not.
Is he the humblest person on earth? And is it humble to say you're the humblest person? Isn't this an Andy Samberg song I'm thinking of? My kids play for me. Is he the humblest person?
No.
Is he humble at all?
No.
There's a little bit of arrogance here. Anybody starting to understand why they killed him? He was a major asshole, people. Major. I'll go back to the point I made earlier. He could have walked around interrogating people and kept his fucking opinion to himself. He did not do that, right? He had to go around and show them all, oh, that's very interesting. You know what? You're not that wise. What happens when people do this to Donald Trump? And he doesn't even have real power. Imagine what he's doing to people in Athens who had the power of life and death over you. Cameron, you want to say something?
Yeah, when I was reading this, I was kind of thinking it definitely seems like this is the first written instance of someone with a god complex, like an absolute god complex. It was so funny reading this and thinking about it.
I think it's funny. I do. I actually think it's hilarious, and it's getting funnier. Just wait. Anybody else? All right, why don't we deal with the second set of accusations? We dealt with the first ones. His rebuttal to the first set, as I've indicated, his rebuttal is implicit, okay? It is circumstantial. He proves he's not a natural scientist because of what he studies, people, and his concerns are moral. He proves he's not a sophist because he's poor. And he doesn't groom politicians, he irritates them. And he exposes them, okay? Now let's talk about the second set of accusations. What are the second set of accusations, everybody? By the way, these are the newer ones. Robert.
That he's an atheist. He teaches others of he doesn't teach them all of the gods, and that he corrupts the young with his beliefs.
Nice. Anybody want to add to that?
He sort of has to confirm with Meletus that he is accused of not believing in gods at all, rather than just not believing in the sort of Athenian ones. And that's kind of one of the first things he asks, because he goes through this long question and answer session, kind of makes a fool out of Meletus.
Good. I'm not going to get into the details of his exchange with Meletus, but for your information, that's an excellent example of how Socrates engaged his interrogations. They were often circuitous. They were often confusing, intentionally so. So if you as a reader feel confused along the way, then that's the way it's supposed to be. And we'll see why in a bit. This was intentional on the part of Plato and Socrates. His rebuttal of Meletus can be very strange at times, talking about horses and dogs and horse beings, and he has all these metaphors that he raises. We'll see this over and over and over again as we move on with Socrates. And it's confrontational and upsetting. Socrates had a lot of enemies, and we know why now. He did not make a lot of friends. He didn't seem to care to make friends. But yes, Meletus, by the way, this is the second accusations are summarized at 24c. It says Socrates is guilty of corrupting the young and of not believing in the gods in whom the city believes, but in other new spiritual things. Okay. And let's see, it was that Lauren was pointing out, right, he's initially accused of not believing in the gods of Athens, but through some back and forth with Meletus, he gets Meletus to admit that the charge really is that he's an atheist. What's his rebuttal? That one's easy. I'm going to get that out of the way. What's his rebuttal to atheism? How does he prove he's not an atheist?
He was also accused of believing in spiritual things, and he argued that because spirits in this time are believed to be the children of gods or gods themselves, he can't really be an atheist if he believes in spirits.
Good. He has just given us some more concrete proof, though, that he's not an atheist. How has he proven he's not an atheist? Audra, you lit up. No?
Well, I mean, there was the story from earlier where he was told by the gods that, oh, he's the person with the most wisdom. Not necessarily the most knowledge, but just the most wisdom. And by upholding that, he is upholding the will of the gods. So therefore, he could not possibly be an atheist.
This is what Sonny said a second ago. He wouldn't go on this wild goose chase, interrogating everybody in Athens about the supposed wisdom if I weren't told by a god to do it. How dare you say I'm an atheist? Is that a good defense? It's kind of bullshitty, I think.
I feel like he would have done that anyway.
Yes.
Regardless of what the god would have said. So it's kind of like, yeah, sure, it's kind of circumstantial.
As we go forward, keep your eye on Plato's view of religion. And because there's good reason to doubt that he was on board with the Greek polytheism at all, okay? I don't believe it's clear he was a theist, which would have been a completely outrageous proposition at this time in history. But it has always struck me as disingenuous, this line of argument, that he's not an atheist because he's supposed to listen to the god of Delphi. That doesn't pass the smell test, as we say in English. That smells a little fishy. By the way, I didn't deal with this earlier, but Robert points out there's a couple of incarnations of this critique, of this accusation. Right, he doesn't believe in spiritual things, et cetera, et cetera. Socrates, through the back and forth of Meletus, gets him to boil it all down to the charge of atheism. Okay, so he rebuts the whole thing by saying, look, I believe in the gods. I followed the god's will at Delphi, right? Remember that whole bit where I embarrassed you all and pissed you off? I was doing the god's will. How could I be an atheist? Okay. All right. Next. Oh, by the way, let me pause for 1 second, okay? Is there any indication in this text about how the jury is receiving his defense? Are they receiving it well?
No.
They are not. How do you know? There is some evidence.
There's like the part in the beginning where he's like, I'm just going to talk to you guys how I talk to you in the marketplace because I don't know how you're supposed to talk in court. So I'm just going to start speaking. And then like throughout, like sometimes while he's talking, he's like, all right, like simmer down. I'm speaking here.
Exactly. So this is not like a play where we have stage directions, but Plato does drop at a couple points, hints, right? Socrates has to say, right, listen up now, be quiet while I'm talking. Stop throwing tomatoes at me, right? He makes it abundantly clear that they're not happy with what they're hearing, right? And you can imagine how this defense is going over with the jury. By the way, as I indicated to you last week, the jury is likely a few hundred men. This is a big crowd, jeering, upset, angry when he's telling them all that I was looking for the wisest person. I discovered you all are dumbasses, and I realized that I'm only the wisest one here. So the God was right. So just imagine how this goes. Okay, let's deal with the next thing. I see I have a question from Anna. Do you think he actually believes his counter-argument to being an atheist and just saying it for his benefit? Well, I think that's up for debate. He's very slippery when it comes to religion. I think Plato and Socrates make it virtually impossible to accept that they believe in the gods of the Greek gods, right? They certainly are not going to be happy with Zeus, the idea of a god, Zeus, who has a wicked temper and throws thunder bolts all over the place. By the way, does anybody else know about Zeus? He has a bad habit.
Are you talking about sleeping with everything?
Well, you're being very PG. I mean, he's a raper. He's a rapist. Zeus is a serial rapist. Anybody know how he goes about his habit?
He changes into various animals and then seduces
Such
them.
as?
A cow, you think is one? Or
a bull? A bull.
Oh, there are more.
There's more.
I think he changed into a peacock once.
Swan.
I do like the golden shower one.
And then he becomes a golden shower. Why do you
Doesn't
like that one?
he like women's husbands and stuff too to like trick them?
Probably. Those are the less exciting ones. I mean, becoming a bull, that's creative, or golden showers. I don't know where he got that from. He becomes a golden shower, and he showers over a woman's private parts, and he impregnates her. This is what Zeus does. And Zeus is famously ill-tempered, unreliable, as are the rest of the gods, the Greek gods. I like to think of the Greek gods as superheroes because they have superpowers, but they have a temper, right? And as someone already indicated, the Iliad and the story of Troy, the gods, there was jealousy among the gods, right? So we're going to see this as we move forward, but there is a lot in the myths that Plato is going to take exception to. He is not going to be happy with the nature of these gods. And by the way, the popular religion of the Greeks, of the Athenians, okay? All right, let me move on here. So let me talk about the second set of new accusations, which is that he corrupts the youth. He supposedly corrupts the youth. How does he rebut this accusation? Does anybody know?
He gives a really weird argument about other people supposedly corrupting youth by like charging them and stuff like that. And then he basically ends it with saying they follow me because they want to, not because I'm doing anything.
So it seems that he's getting this charge about corrupting the youth because he's popular with the young. He talks about young men that hang around him that like to listen to what he has to say and what he's doing. And the status quo in Athens is not happy about this. They're not happy about the influence he's having on them, about the effect he's having on them. And you're right, Robert, there is a very curious exchange again here with Miletus where the argument goes something like, Socrates says like, so I'm the only one in the whole city that's corrupting them and you all are just improving them, right? And Miletus says yes, and it's just a preposterous suggestion. But how does he rebut it specifically? What does he say he tries to teach the youth? What does he want to teach the youth to care about?
I think he tells them that the laws will improve them, or teaching them the laws.
I'm sorry, can you say that a little louder? I can't hear you.
The laws he wants them to teach, or to he says that he thinks the laws will improve them.
Okay. Good. I'd like to hear how. What does he think about the moral state of the Athenians?
Doesn't it have to do with how he wants them to care more about truth and less about major public opinion?
Good. That's a start. What else?
He talks about it in 25a.
25a. What does he say?
All the Athenians, it seems, make the young into fine good men, except me, and I alone corrupt them. Is that what you mean?
Well, that's the general charge, but I'm trying to get some specifics.
When he specifically is talking about things in the sky and below the earth, he means he's teaching the youth the effects of studying those things rather than what those things necessarily are. Like, rather than the scientific like explanation behind nature, natural forces, he I don't know, that's what I got, was that he was trying to also teach like acceptance of not knowing, in a sense, like acceptance of being humbled instead
Vivian,
of.
I think you're trying a little too hard. Let's step back a second here. It's a little simpler. What is his judgment of the moral state of Athens?
I don't remember exactly where he said it, but I think he said it was corrupt.
Wow. What was corrupt about it? What are these guys obsessed with?
I'm not sure if this is a related answer, but in this part, he mainly accuses Meletus of pretending, but not being. When he says, "You don't really care about the youth. You're just saying this to the benefit of your argument and your hubris, and you don't actually care about the moral state and the growth of our youth."
That sounds good. John, do you have a revelation?
I'm pretty sure it mentioned in the text how other people's moral things are just based off other people's moral things, and it kind of just goes into this loop where they just all believe. If one person believes in it, they start all believing it, and so on and so forth.
Good. We're getting closer here, but believing what about what? It almost sounds to me like you're invoking something in English. We talk about keeping up with the Joneses. Anybody heard of that same keeping up with the Joneses? Somebody translate. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Keep up with the Joneses.
Is it because it's such like a common like last name, it's hard to keep up with all of them and like keep track of all of them because it's such a generic last name kind of thing?
Okay. That wasn't exactly how I understood it, but what do you have to do to keep up with the Joneses? It may be difficult. That's true. It is impossible. It is. But what do people do to keep up with their neighbors?
Like gossip.
Perhaps gossip. How else do people keep up with their neighbors?
Eavesdrop.
What'd you say?
Eavesdrop.
Eavesdrop?
They could speak.
I don't necessarily mean keep up as in keep up with the knowledge of, but keep up in terms of a competition. John?
I don't know.
You got to keep up with your neighbors. You got to keep up in terms of a competition. You guys are not yet, have not yet achieved the suburban dream, my friends. What is the suburban dream? What's the American dream?
Maybe like performative displays of wealth, or like having a quote unquote full life by like buying that car that you can't quite afford and stuff like that.
Got to have that boat in your driveway like the Joneses have. Oh shit, the Joneses have a Labrador. Oh shit, the Joneses have a hedge. Mike is confused. They didn't have hedges in ancient Athens. Oh, why is he considered? You ask a pretty profound question, Mike. We'll deal with that in a second. The short of it is, Athens is a rich city. We discussed this last week. This period in time in its history, it is a wealthy state. And the people are obsessed with wealth. And Miletus, being part of the status quo, thinks it's great that the young men think about trade and business. And yet Socrates says that is corrupt. Miletus doesn't see it as corrupt, but Socrates sees it as corrupt. So guess what, everybody? Socrates is the only one in the whole city who is not corrupting the youth. Paul, I'm going to call your attention to the passage where he rebuts this claim. He says, this is at line 30 AB. 30 AB, he says, "For I go around doing nothing, but persuading both young and old among you not to care for your body or your wealth, in preference to, or as strongly for the best possible state of your soul. As I say to you, wealth does not bring about excellence, aka virtue, but excellence makes wealth and everything else good for them, for men, both individually and collectively." Right? The youth in this city are encouraged to pursue wealth and to care about their body. What do you think that means, everybody?
Abstinence?
Question?
I don't know. I'm sorry.
Care about your body?
Care about your public appearance.
Care
and,
about
like,
your
how you
appearance.
come off towards others,
There you
which
go.
obviously Socrates doesn't.
Exercising in the gymnasium, putting on nice perfumes. They would have worn oils, beautiful togas to look good and to seem wealthy. And that is corrupt. They are not concerned with the state of their soul. They should be concerned rather with the state of their soul. And Socrates is the only one telling them that. So Mike asks, why the hell does this upset everybody? Any thoughts?
It's sort of upsetting the entire like way of thinking of everyone in the city for I don't know how many years.
Good.
I don't think they necessarily disagreed with what he was saying. I think it was the way he said it.
Excellent, Robert. That's interesting. They don't disagree with what he's saying, but they disagree with the way he says it. How do you feel when you're shown to be wrong by a friend or a family member sometimes? Maybe your parents. Are you going to admit it? Does it make you angrier? This hasn't made its appearance yet either. It will later, but the preeminent Platonic emotion is shame. That is the emotion that Socrates inflicts upon his speakers. They always say, I feel ashamed. And shame is not the kind of emotion that you like to admit. It's not the kind of emotion you happily suffer through. Do the people know he's right? They probably do, but he's a fucking asshole. And they don't appreciate being shown wrong in this way. And it's going to get a lot worse. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes. Let's move on towards the grand finale here, because when we get the full picture, we'll understand. I think we have the answer to Mike's question a little better. First of all, Socrates is a fan of metaphor, okay? He's often going to say, like, he's going to liken himself to things throughout his various dialogues. And in this case, he says he is like a certain kind of creature. What kind of creature does he say he is like? Actually, this is a good answer to Mike's question too. What kind of creature does he say he's like? And he happily admits it too, by the way.
Did he say he was a bit fly or something on a
Good,
horse's
you're
flank?
close. What?
Did he say that he was like a fly on a horse's flank?
A horsefly. My translation is a gadfly. That's an old word. Let's go with horsefly. Have any of you ever had any experience with a horsefly? What are horseflies like?
They hurt.
Big and gross and.
Now, he could have said a couple things. He could have said, I'm like a monarch butterfly, right? He could have said, I'm like a mosquito, or I'm like, I don't know, a mayfly. No, he's a horsefly. He could have said he's a bee. He didn't. He said he's a horsefly. What is the point? He's happy to own up to this. What's the point?
He knows.
Lydia, go ahead.
He's annoying.
He is an annoying motherfucker, and he knows it. And he owns it. He said, I was put on this earth to be your goddamn horsefly and to bite your ass. And you're not going to like it. And I make no apologies. All right? There's the vote. He's convicted. He's a little surprised about the vote. What surprises him?
I think like the ratio between he thought it was gonna be close, but it was like a landslide.
I think it's the other way.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
He thought it'd be a landslide, but it was close. He's like, I thought I fucking doomed myself here. This is the worst defense ever, right? He's just done the worst defense ever. He just like, I thought you all were going to convict me by landslide. Hey, I actually won over a couple of you. Imagine that. That's amazing. And here's the best part. He's convicted. He must be punished. They turn it over to him for Socrates. What do you recommend? All right. This is my favorite part. What does he recommend for his punishment?
Dinner on the house.
Dinner on the house every day. He says this is on 36E, 37A. I'll read the passage, then I will explain it. He says, the Olympian victor makes you think, well, nothing is more suitable, gentlemen, than for such a man to be fed in the Prytaneum. much more suitable for him than for any one of you who has won a victory at Olympia with a pair of or a team of horses. The Olympian victor, who wins the Olympian Games, the early Olympic Games, makes you think yourself happy. I make you be happy. Besides, he does not need food, but I do. So I must make a just assessment of what I deserve. I assess it at this: free meals in the Prytaneum. How do you think that went down? They are raging. Burn this motherfucker, right? Okay, so here's the picture. The Prytaneum, the Olympic Games, that is their big athletic contest. The victor is celebrated like a demigod, given free meals every day. And Socrates says, you want my penalty for what I'm doing here, trying to uncorrupt you? Oh, okay, my penalty is free meals for life. Why? Because unlike the Olympic victor, who makes you think you're happy, I actually make you be happy. It is clear he deserves everything he gets. He is an unparalleled asshole, right? Does it sound like he's making them be happy? Not really, right? We'll see what the secret to his happiness is. But his claim is, I mean, he's just piling it on. He's piling it on. So let's go a little further here. So free meals, but he says, I know you're not going to do that. He could pay a fine. What about that? What about a fine as penalty?
He's poor.
He's poor. He's got no money. He sends around the hat to his friends right there at that moment. He doesn't have enough. He could be banished, sent out of the city of Athens. What do you say about that?
He would be just as disliked there as he is in Athens, because he would do the same thing.
Dude, I'm going to go to Sparta. You're going to send me to Rome. I will be an asshole again. I will be in the same situation. Let's just do this now, everybody. Let's just do this now, folks. Which means there is one more option. He could stay and do what? If he does what?
Stops being an asshole.
Will shut the fuck up. And will he shut the fuck up? He cannot shut the fuck up. Why? This is actually a famous Socratic quote. Why can he not shut up? Where does he explain this? Anybody find it?
He says that both he would be disobeying the god, and then he says the unexamined life is not worth living for a man.
Thank you. The unexamined life is not worth living. We must examine life. We must examine life through philosophical interrogation. This is how I make you be happy. You don't like this, but this is the way to happiness. And the unexamined life is not worth living. I will not live that way. Therefore, the only penalty is what, everybody?
Death.
He must die. He must die. And how does he feel about death? About this penalty?
He tries to come across as like indifferent to death because he basically says like, I don't understand why people fear death so much because it might actually be really good. It's just nobody's lived to tell the story, I guess.
Well, either it's just a blackout, in which case that's cool, or I'll land in Hades. And then what does he get to do in Hades?
Be an asshole.
Oh, well, okay, yes. He gets to interrogate again, right? So he's like, I'll just black out, or I'll end up in Hades and I get to do my interrogation again for eternity. It's going to be great. Last question, everybody. He has one final request. He's not done. He is not done riling up people. He's got one last request, the cherry on the cake, or whatever they say. What's his last request? Well, now I've agreed to die. What's his last request to the people of Athens?
He says
want
that
them to
he
do for
wants the people who like prosecuted him to cause their like children the same grief that he caused them.
Well, his own children as well, right? He's leaving his children in the care of the Athenians, and he wants them to subject his kids to the same kind of interrogation that he's being put to death for. Asshole, right? Just real, like a final, like he just has to like sink himself further, And there's a fat chance they're going to do that, right? They're putting him to death. Why would they do that for him? Okay. So I'm going to stop with the apology there. Maybe some of you need to go, and that's fine. I told you the 2:30 would not be a hard stop. I'd make it a soft stop. So if anybody has any questions at this point, I'm just going to say what I'm going to do next week. I'm going to open up with a discussion of the Credo, which you also read for today, which is kind of like a little addendum to the apology. And then we'll be getting into the Gorgias as well. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to open up to questions if anybody wants to chat about any of this, or, figure out if you have any lingering questions, we can do this now, okay? And you may just drop out as you need to, everybody, okay? So does anybody have any questions or comments?
I do. I'm curious as to how much of this is like truly Socrates and how much is like what Plato like injected in himself. Like
at the end of the day, Anna, we don't really know, right? And I'm not an archaeologist or historian. My understanding is that they believe this is quite accurate.
Okay.
And the reason they believe it's quite accurate because of the nature of his irritating interrogation style and his speech, right? What we know about him is he had a penchant to be an asshole. And this apology, more than any other dialogue of Plato's, really puts that on display. So that's all I can say to that, really. But you ask an excellent question. But like I said, keep your eye on Socrates as we move along. He's going to seem quite different, especially in the Republic. Other questions?
In terms of the line system, is that just something that you kind of do it like you would page numbers, but just sort of put line numbers in-ish?
Yeah, I'll show you this when you're writing papers for Plato. You're going to quote him, and then in parentheses at the end, you're just going to put the dialogue name and the line number. It can be like 18b or 18 BC if it's a longer passage, okay? It's pretty straightforward. Any other questions? No? All right. Okay, everybody. It's been a pleasure. I'll take a look at the response you all wrote. And if you have any lingering questions, feel free to email me at any point. Okay? And if you want to hang around and chat at the end, that's fine too. Otherwise, have a wonderful week, and I'll see you later, okay?
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
See you later.